Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Not DnD. Thank you very much for joining us. This week we're going to be talking about the Bludgeon tabletop RPG system. It's a fantastic game I got sent. It's made by a team of Indian creatives and Indian artists, and we have Tejas here to tell us all about it. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about the game.
Absolutely. I'm so glad I get to talk to you more about it. So you sent this through to me and said, hey, we've got this game, and I had a look through, and yeah, it looked really different. I loved the different approaches you took to kind of magic and leveling up and power sources in the game. But we're going to get into all of that when we get into that. As everybody knows, the regular listeners or watchers, we first go into your kind of background and history with games as the designer. So how did you discover tabletop role-playing games?
Well, this is going to be a fun story, and I'm sorry if I ramble a bit, but
No problem.
so I was growing up in India. We didn't have tabletop RPGs. We didn't have. I don't even know if the books were sold in our bookstores.
Oh,
At
okay.
least I mean I lived in a smaller town, so definitely not there. Um, So I used to go to game cafes to play this MMO called Ragnarok or
No.
browser-based games, one of the two. And usually with the browser-based games, you would occasionally see these uh, banner ads on the
Yeah.
sides and the top, right? And one of them, occasionally I'd click on them because they'd be like, "Oh, check out this other game," and it'd take me to another browser game, and I'd play that.
Sure. Mhm.
And one of them was like, check out Dungeons and Dragons. I was like, okay, cool. I like fantasy. I'd been reading Lord of the Rings and all.
Mhm.
So I click on that and it takes me to a web-based tutorial of how to play 3.5.
Okay. Oh,
Um,
3.5. Okay.
yeah, super simple. Like it just, hey, you're Ragnar the warrior. You are in this little room. Walk to the door, listen in. You roll a d20 to hear what's on the other side. Just canned stuff. On the other side, there's a goblin. You burst through the door. You kill the goblin,
Mhm.
and it just takes you through that flow. And at the end of it, I was like, wait, you can use dice to like simulate like combat. And I'd been playing video games, so
Mhm.
it kind of just like gave me this like eureka moment where I was like, oh wait, I can, all these games I've been playing that I just thought was, just created out of the ether. I could simulate that. And sure, we don't get the fancy dice that I saw in this web tutorial, but I have D6s at home from like all
Mhm.
my other Rinka board games. So I got all the D6s I could and I tried to replicate that system.
Mhm.
So I remember I first created something that was very Lord of the Ring-esque, uh,
Mhm.
using whatever I could remember from the web page, and I very quickly forgot the term Dungeons and Dragons. I couldn't remember it.
Okay.
Um, but I remember the basics of what it showed me. I remembered the basic setup and then general fantasy. So I merged those two, merged bits of what I remembered from playing Warcraft 3 at a friend's place, and so that's how I started creating games. Actually,
Oh,
that gave
wow.
me my
Yeah.
start on running games at the time. First for my younger brother and his friends, and then eventually to my friends. And so I just kind of created my own systems,
Mhm.
not realizing there was like a broader world out there. And it wasn't
Mhm.
until I was in college that a friend I had met on Facebook who was in America was like, "Hey, here's a download link," and it was a download link to all the 3.5e and 4e PDFs.
Okay.
Illegal,
Yeah.
of course, but
Mhm.
that was when I finally got introduced to like the official stuff.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I was just whatever homemade stuff I made, which spanned from general fantasy to Pokemon to Star Wars to I don't know
Mhm.
some one more thing. So that's how I got started on tabletop. And despite that, it wasn't until I got my first job that I actually played real D&D when one of the other designers who had just moved back from Canada,
Mhm.
um, he had a basic starter set with the dice and all that, which we couldn't get out in India at the time.
Mhm.
And he ran a session for us. He's also one of the co-creators of the system.
Mhm.
Um, and that was the first time playing like real D&D.
Mhm. And then kind of grown since then. So you've
Yeah.
decided to, even though you now have access to D&D, and it sounds like the tabletop RPG community in India is growing a lot at the moment, but you're still wanting to make your own games and stuff. But yeah, but I kind of asked 2 questions there, so I'll go to the first one. So how has the gaming scene in India, like, changed over time?
It's changed quite a bit. When I was starting out, it felt like I was trying to like recruit people into a cult because I would tell them
Yeah.
about what
Yeah,
the game was.
sure, yeah.
Yeah. And they'd just be like, "But why? You know, like why would you do this? I could either just play a video game or I just go out and play cricket. What's the point of this?" Um, and I did have a few friends who played, but it was like, you'd find the one or two occasionally.
Mhm,
I had my two buddies in high school where we'd always be at the back of the class rolling dice
mhm,
into a little compass box. And then eventually in my first job where we had a small group, and that group stuck together and also are the creators of Bludgeon. And how things have changed is actually like things have just blown up
mhm.
since the pandemic. I
Okay.
think stuff like Critical Role and Stranger Things, and then
Mhm,
everyone being at home, and then uh, this access to like all the stuff that was just blowing up at the time filtered through, and a bunch of homegrown nerds were like, "Oh, this sounds cool."
mhm.
And so Discord groups shut up, and there's a lot of virtual play as compared to old school. We meet up
Mhm.
and play,
Yeah.
but it's definitely growing.
Amazing. Well, I guess because India is such a big country, I guess online play is so much easier. Because, like you say, if it's
Oh
not
yeah,
really popular, physically going to play games with people, you might be like, "You live too far away from me for us to have a weekly game. This is too
yeah.
much." Whereas online, oh, that's really cool that all the online tools and that explosion really helped kind of build that
Mhm.
up there. But I'm going to jump back to my second question that I kind of
Yeah.
rambled in the 2 parts, which was, so despite having access to games and things like that, you still wanted to kind of make your own. So let's talk about the Bludgeon TTRPG system. When did that start?
Um, Probably a year after I started, or 2 years after I started playing like proper D&D.
Okay.
It didn't take long.
Mhm,
Um, I think it started essentially with the conversation after we had played a session till like past midnight. My co-creator Nilesh Krishnan, as mentioned on the title book, he and I were walking home after a session. We were just talking about how it went because I had DM'd, he was playing a bard, and he said something that kind of triggered this whole thing, which was that if you take away the narrative wrapper of what the bard spells are, um, your action economy is the same as a wizard and a sorcerer and all that. Like the passives add a little bit of change, but you're effectively doing the same thing. So your considerations in combat are more or less the same. And we were like, yeah, like as someone who's supposed to be kind of singing as per the class fantasy, um, you're not doing anything that mimics you singing apart from just saying you are. But the
mhm,
actions you take aren't kind of leading you on that journey either. So we
mhm,
started talking about that, and kind of on the spot, I think we just came up with like a very basic solution of like, yeah, what if you had to take actions that were like you singing a verse, and that was building up power that then resulted in a crescendo, and the crescendo was a big spell, and what would that look like? And then we obviously got home, fell asleep, but the idea stayed with me, and then I kept
mhm,
like thinking about it. I think in a day or two I kind of wrote down the basics of the bard class and how it functioned, and
mhm,
then from there we scaled that into like a full arcane system with a commonality that could be kind of bent around for the different subclasses. And then once we finished that, we started thinking about, okay, wait, let's do the same exercise for other classes that we play.
mhm.
And we just kept building and building, and then it just became its own thing over time.
Amazing. So for people listening and watching, you can download the current version of the game on itch right now. The link is on the screen or in the show notes. So if while we're talking you want to download that and take a look, feel free. You can do that there. But one thing I wanted to talk about with the game is it does use a D20 as its kind of core dice resolution. But one of the things that was really different about it for me was the power sources and the way you approach leveling up in the game. So I'd love to talk about that. So let's talk about the different power sources that drive the game. Could you introduce that concept to us?
Sure. Um, we wanted like we wanted to innovate in how you take actions. We didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
go, rejigging the whole wheel. So when we came up with that arcane system, the idea was to have a sort of core rule set that governed like common classes. So
Mm-hmm.
warlocks, wizards, sorcerers, bards, everything of that ilk. Um, but then you couldn't use that same system and say, yeah, that should also work for warriors and for uh, druids and so on and so forth. Um, if you wanted to really make that class fantasy shine and to hit that core idea of your actions that you take inform the role play and kind of support it, you needed to have a solution that matched each. So
Mm-hmm.
we divided the different archetypes into different classifications, which are these umbrella systems, the power sources. So we have arcane, we have primal, we have martial classes, we have chakra based classes, and divine classes, and that
Mm-hmm.
everything's kind of divided into those, but they also kind of work well together, so you can
Mm-hmm.
multi-class. It
Mm-hmm.
just depends on your appetite for how much you want to like juggle, really.
Mm-hmm. And what are let's go through some of those power sources and the different approaches that they have in the game.
Sure. Um, I think just at a high level,
Yeah.
arcane classes are all about building up spell points, right? We give
Okay.
them like more thematic names, but essentially they're spell points, and then you
Mm-hmm.
convert those into spell casting. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the difference is how you would build them up. So
Yeah.
whereas a bard is kind of building up power to that point, a wizard doesn't have to. They
Mm-hmm.
can just have a spell pre-prepared
Mm-hmm.
and ready to go, but they're limited by how many pages in a book they would have, right?
Oh, okay.
Um, the divine system is actually something that's very different from uh, kind of like the common view of the nature of divine and all that. Probably a bit
Okay.
more Indian or at least Asian in influence, which
Okay.
is it's very behavior oriented. So
Mm-hmm.
these classes have these prayers that they cast around them, and depending on what god and what that god is expecting from them, if those actions that support what the god wants are taken within those prayer zones, then they gain divinity, and then they can use
Okay.
that divinity to call upon their god's powers. The chakra system is based about finding balance. So when you're playing that class, you have a balance bar and you swing between emotional states until finally you hit that perfect balance moment and you have this amazing power attack that you can execute.
Okay.
Um, Martial classes are based on stances, and the idea for them was like a lot of conventional fighting styles, you kind of mix and match things. So they were kind of created so you could pick from different martial
Okay.
stances and then create like a custom fighting style that you were good at.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we have the primals, which is not in the free book that's out on itch yet, but we'll be pushing it out at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's based on a card mechanic.
All right.
Um, yeah, we wanted to kind of get a feel for um, that these primal classes are basically channeling these primal energies that are like forces of nature. And like a force of nature, it starts out small and then just keeps getting more and more powerful. And somehow we ended up with the card mechanic where you play these sort of basic cards and they build up and you can trade them in for more powerful versions of them. Um, and you're kind of playing a little mini solitaire as you go.
Nice. I love that. So I love, like you say, the different approach to. So what you've done there is like really thematically thought about what this character's doing, and then like put in a mechanical support to make it so the mechanics feel like what you're doing, which is
Exactly.
was really great to see. The only thing I thought with that is that it must be really difficult to like balance it, because when you're playing a game, you want everybody to be playing different things, but no one to feel like, oh, well, they're playing the good one and I've got this crappy one here. So how is that like playtesting for balance and making sure that everyone gets a cool moment to do their cool thing?
I think you've actually hit on the solution right there, is that we're not exactly trying to balance it perfectly. We
Mhm.
want to balance it for the cool moments,
Okay.
but conditionally cool moments. So everybody should have a moment where they feel overpowered, as
Mhm.
long as they're not hitting it like every time or consistently or predictably. That's
Yeah.
okay. But we definitely wanted to have moments where someone is like, "Shit, did I just break things?" And they feel amazing about it, but it
Mhm.
happens once in a while. And in our playtest, at least, we have moments that just pop off, and everyone's like out around the table cheering because something
Mhm.
crazy happened, or a mixture of mechanics came together at the right time.
Mhm. Fantastic. And I mentioned before about how leveling up works
Oh yeah.
in the system. So what I really liked about this is it had seemed to have a focus on breadth opposed to just like giving you bigger numbers when you upgrade. So could you talk about your like design philosophy to leveling up and how that looks mechanically?
Yeah, one of the issues with balancing is if you're balancing for power, which is depth, you then have to make sure everything kind of adheres to that philosophy and you're
Mhm.
scaling in brackets. Um, but if you're balancing for what we were trying to achieve, which is this sort of moments of conditional power, you have to go with breadth. And I
Mhm.
think that also just comes from our experience as video game designers and programmers,
Mhm.
because the team behind this, we work in video games, so we've kind of
Oh,
built
okay.
this. Yeah, I probably should have led with that. So we've built stuff like this in different capacities, or if not built it, we've been very interested in it, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of learnings from that side of design that we can bring into TTRPGs. So
Mhm.
this sort of breadth-based design is something we've always enjoyed and kind of wanted. So
Mhm.
we built that into what we were building here, because this project started out as a passion project for our home game. It actually being something that we put out there was my wife's idea. She was
Okay.
like, "We've been playing this for a while. Why don't you just compile all your notes?" And I did that, and this was during the pandemic. And then I think the first compilation of all my notes was about 89 pages on Word,
Mhm.
like unfiltered or like not formatted, just
Yeah.
bullet points across. And that's when we realized that this could be something that, we could put out there and other people could actually play. It just need to be
Mhm.
cleaned up and get some art for it.
Mhm. Fabulous. So, with that in mind, of the idea of breadth and making the game that way, how does that work mechanically? Because you've got like upgrade points, adaptations, different abilities, passive skills, all this stuff. So, how does that actually look?
Mm, it's actually not as complicated as it looks at first glance.
Mhm.
You have adaptations, which are these physical changes to how your character looks,
Mhm.
based off of like what race they are. We have passives and abilities based off of your class, and that's about it. And an upgrade point is something that you can invest into either of those to provide more options for your character, right? Some of them will give you a little more power, but across the board, it's just giving you more tools to deal with different situations,
Mhm.
specifically in combat, because we are a very combat driven group, so
Mhm.
we really focused on that side of things.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's the upgrade point system is meant to kind of allow you to kind of invest in the areas that you want. You use those for multi-classing as well, and we've balanced the spend of it to ensure that you can't just kind of get too many options all at once, because we don't want to like overburden players with too many things all at once, so that they can kind of ease into the powers that they will have.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the stats in the game. So we talked a little bit about the characters you'll be playing, like the different power sources, and you can have different classes and things. But you chose to have stats be different from what would be in a traditional kind of D20 game. So could you just talk us through that?
Sure. That was an intentional decision, and I think part of it was the basic array of six stats. It just didn't work for what I was trying to achieve.
Hmm.
And a through line of everything I've said is that we really want our mechanics to kind of flow into a good theme and a good role play experience.
Hmm.
And one of the kind of shortcomings I did find with the way we were using stats with our initial games was that it wasn't supporting nuances in how you would take an action. So what we have is a 3 by 3 grid where the columns are your body, your mind, and your charisma.
Mhm.
And across the rows, the top row is your sustained effort, your middle row is your exerted effort, and your
Mhm.
last row is your reactionary effort. So,
Mhm.
as an example, think of it as the difference between just in the body column, being able to run for long distances in a marathon would be your
Mhm.
sustained effort. Your exerted effort would be how quickly you could pick up speed when a race would begin.
Mhm.
And your reactionary effort would be your ability to notice uneven ground and not trip. And this would allow us, this style of stat breakdown allows us to then, as a DM, say ask for the a stat that matches the action rather than someone just saying I take a broad action. Whereas I can now then say, oh wait, how are you doing that? And it
Mhm.
allows a player to really get into the mind of their character and think about what that character would actually do.
Mhm. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I really liked in Mind as well the way it's separated like memory, wit, and abstraction. So memory is like how you retain knowledge, and
Mhm.
abstraction was your ability to connect different pieces of information. And I
Yeah.
thought it was really great because those are two different skills for sure. Because I think we all know somebody who's really book smart but is
Yeah.
not a practical person,
Yes.
and that just made sense to me. And I thought you could create really unique character combinations with these different things because you can have characters that have different strengths in those areas.
Mhm.
I thought that was really nice. Um, so another thing I wanted to talk about was the approach to magic in the game, and what magic looks like because it's a little bit different, like you say, with the power sources. So what was the kind of the core ideas behind magic in the world?
Um, with Magic in the World, we kind of thought of kind of creating a okay, wait, let me back up. With Magic, we wanted to focus um on an expression of it that was immediate, right? A lot of games have Magic that can do crazy fantastical things, and we do want fantastical things, but it always feels a little bit too easy as a solution. So
Mm-hmm.
the way we view Magic is that it's something that exists in a flash. It's not something that you can like keep uh, expressing out into the world, and if you
Mm-hmm.
do, it needs to be like handled with a lot of care and with a lot of exertion.
Mm-hmm.
So all the arcane classes, they can't like create a magical something that stays somewhere. They have
Mm-hmm.
these quick expressions of magic with their spells, whereas primals, using a raw form of magic, can have some effect that is maybe temporary for a turn or two, but that's as far as it'll get you. Um, it also allows our world to feel a little bit more quick and sudden without magic becoming a solution to everything.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that. Another thing I want to talk about is the artwork for the game because
Oh, yeah.
it's really pretty, and also the graphic design. I really like the style behind it. So, what was your kind of intention and approach with the artwork?
Well, with the artwork, the first thing we wanted to do was to support artists in India.
Hmm.
We're a bunch of creators from India, and it made sense to us that we should be supporting our industry in
Hmm.
what like in whatever capacity our industry is
Yeah.
nascent as it is. So we reached out to a bunch of artists back home. A few of them agreed to work with us, and that's how we got the art.
Hmm.
Um, the look of it was honestly to just express what they thought was cool, right?
Hmm.
It's not like we're going out and saying make this look Indian. In the
Hmm.
same way that when you or at least original D&D art, no one was going make this look Norse or make this look Greek.
Hmm.
It's kind of just there, right?
Yeah.
And that's all we wanted is what is our version of cool, right?
Hmm.
And the system is meant to be used by anyone for whatever
Hmm.
way. So we're not expecting you to have like this historical understanding of what's happened in the subcontinent for the last so many hundred years.
Mhm.
We just like the aesthetic, and it represents stuff that we've seen growing up, stuff that's really cool, and so that's what we've got. To that end, like our cover art was made by this amazing artist called Hazem Amin, and
Mhm.
he put a great spin on it. The characters you see in the back follow this old children's comic book style that we all
Mhm.
had while growing up, while their characters in the foreground are a bit more gritty and real.
Mhm.
Um, some of the art was created by an individual named Akansha Mitra. She does these amazing line art sketches that are used across our chakra system, and all the other art was done by a studio called E-Tree, and they're based out of Hyderabad. And it was just a group of artists that we hired for about a month, and they just gave us as much as they possibly could, and
Mhm.
used inspirations from across India. And one of my close friends, Vineet, he helped out with a few of our landscape pieces. We'll be adding those to the book soonish.
Beautiful. Well, with the game, in terms of setting, it felt to me very much like a toolkit role playing game that I could put
Yes.
in any setting of my choice. So it didn't feel like the book came with a specific setting or world and things like that. It felt very much like, hey, these are the tools to go and run a game, go play with it. So I guess, and that's going to be the ongoing intention.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our basic lore that we're adding to the book.
Hmm.
If you want to play like the way we've played it, right?
Hmm.
But you don't have to. You're right. It's meant to be a toolkit. And across the book, I offer suggestions. I even point out that, hey, you can add more here. You should definitely add more here.
Hmm.
Um, and because that's also the way we play, and
Hmm.
could be a video game thing where we expect people to mod.
Hmm.
Um, but it like we want people to take this and just make it their own. You don't
Hmm.
have to use all the rules as is. You can change things, flavor them, add on whatever works for your table.
Yeah. And speaking about the game, we mentioned before you can download it on itch now in the current format. As you mentioned, you are still kind of working on the game. There's new editions coming out. So, what sort of stage is the game in now, would you say, and what future plans do you have?
Um, Currently the book is kind of in a ongoing just balance and patching phase.
Hmm.
So kind of like a live ops title, I guess. Um, we have intentions to get the book out to a point where we can publish it. We are
Hmm.
at least internally talking about pushing maybe for a Kickstarter or something like that, so that
Hmm.
we can build up the funds to like actually pay our artists again.
Hmm.
Because everything we've done, we've kind of done just out of pocket by between all of us because we care.
Hmm.
But yeah, if it has to be more than that, like a proper, actual marketable book,
Hmm.
yeah, I think we're talking about. We haven't really decided on when and how and all the
Hmm.
details. But till then, like the book is still free on itch, and it'll get updated as and when we have time between our day jobs.
Perfect. So the best place would be to go on itch and follow on there and download it. And
Yeah.
are there any other ways that if people are interested and would like to support that they can get involved?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're on socials. You can look us up for Tactics and Chai. That's the word tactics, the letter N, and the word chai all at once.
Hmm.
Um, we're on Blue Sky as well as X, though we're probably using Twitter X less than we
Hmm.
used to.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, whenever we have updates or whenever I think of stupid memes, we update there.
Perfect. That's great to know. Well, the game is looking fantastic already, and I'm really excited to see how it develops and grows. And yeah, if you do a crowdfunder, definitely let us know, and we can add the links in the show notes here so people can listen along.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on and sharing with us. Before you go, I do have one last question, which I always ask, which is, do you have any other recommendations for any tabletop RPGs? And the rules, of course, cannot be a game that you've made, and of course, cannot be Dungeons and Dragons.
For sure. I actually saw a really cool game a while ago at UKG called Quint. I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation. Quintessence.
Oh yeah.
It has some very interesting mechanics that I thought were really like just very clever. And for someone who really likes mechanics and like
Mhm.
clever mechanics, I was like, oh, they're onto something here.
Yeah.
Um, so I haven't had a chance to play it, but I've read the rules, and yeah, very clever.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that
and
quintessence. We had them on the show before, so if people
yes,
are listening and are interested, you can go listen to the episode on quintessence and hear more about it there.
it's
Yeah.
actually a really fun episode as well. I
Yeah.
had a blast listening to that. And just as an addition, there's an adventure that should be on the DM's Guild for 5e. I'm just trying to remember the name. Wild in the Moonlight, I believe. It's by an Indian creator. It's a adventure for I think level 2 or 3 characters with werewolves and all that. So should be a fun time.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for those recommendations. That's all we have time for this week. So, wish you the best of luck with the project as it carries on. As we mentioned several times, you can go to itch and download the game for free now in its current state and take a look at it there. But I think that's all the time we have for this week. So, again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the game with us. And thank you for everyone who's watched and listened. I think that's all for this week. So, I'll just play the outro. Thanks very much, all.
Thank you.
Bye.